Okay, we'll be calling the meeting to order. Today is November 12th, 2019, 6 p.m. and is our APL board meeting. Do you have any public comment? No public comment. Great. We'll move on to the...
Brenda, I'm sorry, can we just hold on? If we're
Sure.
gonna do this electronically, then the equipment has to work and I have to get the agenda. So, I don't know, is everybody else up? Okay, good, that would be good. No, if we're going to do this electronically, if we've made this commitment, we've purchased this software, it's got to work at a board meeting, don't you think? I could have printed it out.
You all set?
Okay.
All
Great,
right.
thank you.
Okay, we'll move to our next agenda item, the tangible development presentation.
Yeah.
Yes.
All right, first of all, thank you for having us. I'm Sujata Chaudhry. I am CEO and founder of Tangible Development. I'm here with LB Hannes, and LB's on my team. We're really excited to be here today. Thank you for inviting us and giving us a few minutes of your time. So the company's been around for 10 and a half years. We're a diversity, equity, inclusion consulting company. We have clients that are in the public sector, the nonprofit sector, and for-profit. So just want to give you a little bit of an overview of the proposal that you've already seen. So really, we're not, in our presentation, we didn't mimic the proposal, but we really wanted to address some of the thoughts that Scott had shared with us and to be able to address your questions. Okay, because you have already seen the proposal, so we figured why re-present the proposal to you. So just to give you a little bit of an overview as to who we are and what we do, right? Tangible Development. We are, like I said, a diversity, equity, inclusion consulting company. So our strategy is change strategy, and we're big believers that everything we do, all our solutions that we create for any of our clients are very client-centric, first of all. We're big believers that in order to create the change when it comes to diversity, equity, and inclusion in your organization from a strategic standpoint, has to come from the top and has to have leadership support and buy-in. And so we believe that systemic change occurs from the top, because if our leaders role model behavior and believe in the movement, then and the initiative, then we can translate it through the organization. Okay? And we also believe in aligning our diversity, equity, inclusion strategy that we create for you with your business strategy. So it's not one of those where it's misaligned. We make sure that everything we do aligns with your business goals so that they're measurable and they're that we can show you results at the end. Okay? We do that through cultural transformation, and what we mean by cultural transformation is that we then take that strategy that we've created with your leadership team and knowing what your goals are. We create a strategy that we then put into action, right? And that strategy then becomes part of your footprint of how you view diversity, equity, and inclusion through the organization. Then we also create systemic change, right? How are we handling policies and procedures, hiring practices? How are we creating an inclusive work environment? How are we translating those and giving our staff and our team members and our managers and our leaders tools and strategies in order to be able to accomplish it? And then in the end, how are we taking your business strategy, your diversity, equity, inclusion strategy, and aligning it with goals that we can then show you that we actually have results? Because diversity, equity, inclusion can be a sort of a nebulous conversation. We like to solidify it with measurable results and goals, okay? And those will be done, and those are stated through the plan, and then each, and we would course correct if we found that the goals were not where we wanted them to be, and if we were working with the team, and when we worked with the team, we would adjust those, okay? And then what we do is we develop training modules, we develop leadership coaching, we develop courses to support whatever it is that we're trying to create change in that cultural transformation. So, for example, if we're working on policies and procedures or hiring practices, right, a systemic change that we're trying to create, we would then train maybe hiring managers on how to avoid biases in hiring. So we would develop a training specifically to address those, right? So it's all client-centric and customized to make sure that it has to do with Albany Public Library systems. Okay, so some of our experience, we've been working with Saratoga Public Libraries. We've recently done their leadership day and their full staff day. We did an inclusive leadership series with them. We also have been, and we're in the process of also doing a strategic plan bid for them. And Southern Adirondack Library Systems, we worked with all 58 of the library systems and their executive directors to help them with creating some sort of a beginning framework to their diversity, equity, inclusion footprint. So every location has a different footprint, so we made sure that everything we did aligned with the footprint that they have in their communities and their regions, because everyone's plan has a different end goal. Okay? So, with that being said, what we did in our proposal and what we are doing now is we really take everything into consideration. It's very rooted in research, right? That we don't come up with our strategy just because it aligns with the business strategy, but we also take into consideration the American Library Association's diversity standards. And also listen to what you're asking for as an organization and what you think are priorities in your goals. So we took a look at that and we said, okay, what are some of the things that we heard through your staff and through some of the feedback we got from the board and some of the work we've been doing with Scott, and cultural awareness and the self and others, right? That's a standard that we should recognize, and we'll make sure that we weave it into what we do at Albany Public Library. Cross-cultural knowledge, and when we talk about culture, we're not just talking race and ethnicity too, we're talking about cultures of communities, cultures of people, and the geographic footprint that you represent and represents your users. Organizational and professional values, also a big piece of your strategic plan is workforce development and hiring people, right, and increasing your workforce, so we talk about workforce diversity. Organizational dynamics, meaning what do you want your culture to be internally, and how do you want it to be, right? And then cross-cultural leadership. So those are all standards, and we highlighted those because they spoke to what it was that you found important at your organization and the areas that you wanted to work on. The other ones are just as important, but you know, we put together ones that we thought would support the goals that you were interested in achieving for this particular session. All right, so we also then took into consideration, what is your strategic plan? And are we making sure that we take our strategy and align it with you, right? So ensuring that APL has adequate staffing and staff expertise. So what are we going to be doing? And we're gonna show you, LV's gonna talk about the focus areas that align with that particular bullet point. And then we talk about creative and implementation of engagement strategies. So what are we gonna be doing internally to create champions, right? And internally and externally to take that message out so that we can then increase staffing and create a brand that people want to come to the Albany Public Library. Not only champion it inside the organization and as a culture, but then speak about it externally so people want to come to the Albany Public Library and join it from not only a user standpoint, but in a future employee standpoint. And then also Board of Trustees are engaged, right? So obviously you're involved here today in making the decisions and driving this initiative together with the staff.
So, like Sujata, first of all, hello everybody. I recently moved back to the area after living in Florida for 8 years, and this is the first day that I maybe thought twice about it. I'm glad to be here with you tonight. Like Sujata has kind of outlined, we really, the work that we do with tangible development, where our sweet spot is systemic change, right? So we're not coming in here thinking that you've never or are not currently working on diversity issues in the Albany Public Library system. That's happening just inherently by the work that libraries do. But what we often don't have time for is to take kind of a systemic look at the organization and how leadership and change can happen from the top to make it a more integrated and intentional shift in the work that we do. So starting at the top from the ALA standards and diversity standards, weaving that through then your strategic plan, and I know it ends in 2020, and you might be in the process of thinking about creating a new one, so you know this could also be part of that conversation. Then thinking about how do we bring the focus areas to what Albany Public Libraries specifically wants to focus on. And the feedback we got was really working at workforce development, not only from a recruitment retention standpoint, but it's only half the equation. If you're recruiting more diverse employees, and we define diverse everything from race and ethnicity through gender, sexual orientation, abilities, education levels, kind of across the board, veterans, etc. It's one thing to get those folks here, but it's another thing to create an environment that they will be successful and want to stay. So we have to make sure that we're paying attention to the equal balance of that equation. So our focus areas being, how do we develop enhanced strategies to recruit and retain specifically people of color in the workforce, particularly because of being in Albany and the communities that we serve. Assess and solve barriers to employment for other underrepresented populations in the library. Also knowing that identity like this is not a monolith. We are not only our race or only our gender. It's very complicated. These are kind of complex issues, and tackling them from a kind of a holistic place will serve everybody. Identify and eliminate factors that prevents Albany Public Library from being a fully inclusive organization. So how do we manage bias internally as an organization between staff, between leadership, but then also between staff to patrons, and even maybe patrons to patrons. There's a lot, the work that libraries do is really people oriented, and people inherently have bias. So there are strategies to kind of build into the organization to address biases that might be impacting us. And then the last one, to create Albany Public Library specific mechanisms to address bias in the workplace. Like Sujata said, we're not kind of a one size fits all. We tailor our approach to the client's needs. The issues that folks are experiencing are in some ways universal, but the way that they manifest are going to be different depending on the organization that you're in. And so we want to make sure that we are being informed by the kind of like larger social issues that we're trying to address, but also making them doable. What would work for a global foundry would not necessarily work for Albany Public Library, because what you do is different. So, we wanted to kind of like myth bust a little bit about strategic diversity planning. And so my background's in higher ed, and my dissertation is on strategic diversity planning, so I'm like deep in the weeds about what it is and is not. So strategic diversity planning, like strategic planning overall, is kind of an organizational endeavor. Oftentimes it's catalyzed by a crisis or an issue, right? So maybe there was some kind of bias incident, we gotta strategize to figure out how to make this not happen again. But really, if we take a step back and say, what were the things that led up to it? How can we be more responsive to issues rather than reactive? So strategic diversity planning allows us to do that. It's an opportunity for an institution or an organization to take responsibility for organizational change rather than constantly being in reactive mode, being more responsive and in front of issues. Like Sujata said, it's a top-down change effort that relieves the pressure of frontline staff or underrepresented people. A lot of the times, the folks that are dealing with the most pressing diversity issues of bias, are the folks at the front desk. In higher ed, it was always the facilities folks in the residence halls. They're the ones that are seeing the lived reality of students every day. So a lot of the pressure to deal with issues of conflict and bias, I think disproportionately falls on our frontline staff and the people that are kind of running our facilities every day. So how can leadership take some more responsibility and spread it out across the organization? Strategic diversity planning is comprehensive and can transform organizations to be more equitable and diverse. And the last one is important. It's the shortest one. It's a journey. It's not a destination. So strategic planning is not a destination. These are really complex social issues that we're trying to wrap our arms around. There isn't going to be a finite landing place in this. We're going to try to make progress and be on a journey together. But there is no point Z on this, because people are complex and they're constantly changing. We've got to evolve with the needs of the communities that we serve. So strategic planning, when it's done well, is not a thought exercise. I think we're all probably familiar with strategic planning that happens and then it gets put on a free ring binder and set on a shelf, and we did it. It's great. When it's done well, it is not just a thought exercise. It's not only for leadership. So when strategic diversity planning is done well, the whole organization is involved in it. Not necessarily equally, right? So we'll have some people that are more involved in it, but we want stakeholders to feel like they're engaged in the process. It's not fluff or jargon. We want to take diversity, equity, inclusion, and words like that out of the kind of like nebulous, jargony atmosphere and put it into everyday work, and so people can feel like they're actually making progress on these efforts. It's not myopic, so it's not necessarily, we can't, while we can focus on certain populations, we don't want to just zero in too far that we lose a larger connection to issues that are impacting different communities. So when it's done well, it's not just myopic, it takes a broad look, but also has very strategic strategies to address specific issues that are impacting certain communities. And the last one that I'll mention is it's not a quick fix. If this was easy to fix, we all would have figured it out by now, that our jobs wouldn't have to exist. But this is a process, and one that, when done well, is intentional, and we keep at it. So you have the specifics of how we do our strategic diversity planning and kind of the ideas we set forth for y'all. We just want to talk through what the impact of doing this would be. So during the assessment phase, we would offer you a comprehensive analysis of the current diversity, equity, and inclusion state of Albany Public Libraries. Everything from the data that we have, where are the pockets of data that we're missing, what are the questions that we're not asking, and how do we find that information out? So we would give you a report and an analysis of what your current state is. It would give you a clear footprint on underrepresented populations and how they engage with Albany Public Library, both at the staff level and the patron level. And doing qualitative data that gives us a little bit more depth of understanding the needs of each community within the Albany Public Library. I'm a qualitative person. I understand the great value of quantitative data, but what I believe qualitative data does is really gives us the nuance of what a number doesn't give us. And then the strategy development phase would be an organization-wide effort, so everybody would feel like they're involved in it around diversity and inclusion efforts, particularly around the recruitment and retention of folks of color, and then also increase numbers of applicants to civil service exams and other forms of employment through all underrepresented communities, and how we would define that. And then the last one, kind of that balance to the equation. We want to make sure if we're inviting and recruiting folks to come and join our organization, we have a dynamic and inclusive work environment that has the ability to be flexible and nimble to handle the conflict and the issues that come up with being a diverse organization. All of this being mission and people-centric. So this could take up, depending on how long and how vigorous we wanna jump into this, could take anywhere from 6 months to a year. We were with a client earlier that's working on this, and I think we, for the first two phases, just the assessment phase, and into strategy development around 6 months, but depending on how hard or fast you wanna go, it could take anywhere between 6 months to a year. Sujata, did I miss anything?
Not that I can think of.
Okay. Questions, comments, concerns?
Any questions? No
One,
questions?
once we have the report, what is the library's, what are we gonna do with it? I guess that's my question for you, that these guys, but.
Which portion of the report, I guess, the assessment portion of it or the strategic plan portion of it?
Both.
So the assessment portion of it, and Scott, feel free to jump in any time, but from an assessment standpoint, the goal is that we're going to give you data that helps you recognize, first of all, what are your success points? What are you already doing well, right? So here's our success. What are we building? Now, what are we gonna do to build from that success? Because why recreate what we've already done? So that's the first point. The second point is going to be then, okay, what are we gonna do now to build success on that? And what are our challenge areas, and how do we bridge those gaps? So the data is gonna give you all of that, from a community demographic, from a staff demographic, internal and external. So that's what that's gonna give us, so then it gives us that footprint that we can then analyze and say, okay, now what are we actually trying to do here? Are we trying to increase our workforce? Are we trying to increase our workforce whether it comes to layers in education, people of color, male, female, are we, those types of things. So that's what our data is gonna allow us to do. Then the strategy is going to be us actually coming up with solutions for you to say, okay, if we're trying to hire people of color, right, what are some avenues that we can do to expose people of color to the public library systems? How are we going to get them to, the perception right now is that the civil service exam is for white people, right? That's the perception right now in the community. So how do we overcome that barrier, that perception first of all? How do we overcome the ability to then attend or come and find out about the civil service test? What are some things we can do to implement to encourage them or even guide them through the process? So that it's not about necessarily capability or only white people can take the exam per the perception, right? How do we bridge that gap? So those are the types of things the strategy will do, and then we will actually help you do that through the strategic plan.
Telling how we'll incorporate this into our process. Remember, this is part of our strategic plan. So just like all the other components of our strategic plan, what we'll do is we'll come through with tactics that we've assigned for the organization to walk through and do with an outcome and some outputs that'll show that there is some success. So it'll be reported the same way we report the rest of the strategic plan. So this will probably be a larger component than we expected of the strategic plan, but that's a good thing. And with so much of our strategic plan currently either in process or with outputs and outcomes already, this is a good way for us to kind of spend a good chunk of 2020 because it's such an important part of that plan. So just look at it as a part of the larger plan where we have those tactics and we constantly report them out to them.
So what does the data look like? So you're looking at our customers, our staff composition,
Our
door
community
counts?
our community footprint. Oftentimes, like for example, when we worked with all of the YMCA's in the capital region. Now, again, library systems and YMCA may be different, they're still community-based organizations bringing a service to our community. Each branch, so there were 12 branches in this footprint of the YMCA, so what we did with them is we analyzed, and it was interesting because what they thought their footprint was versus what their actual footprint was different. So then it was recognizing, okay, so our internal and our external don't match, right? So the data is looking at your external footprint, looking at your internal footprint, whether it be staff or patrons, users, right? And then saying, okay, why are we missing the people that we're missing? And what can we do to get them to come through that door and use our services? And why aren't they using them? And so what are we gonna do about it? Did I answer your question?
Yeah.
So I guess in terms of timeline, how long do you think it will take for, or has this already been done, the assessment piece? I'm just trying to think for our purposes, when the plan is going to be given to staff so that, and when we should expect an update on these pieces of the strategic plan, so kind of, I guess, 3 phases.
Okay, so from the time that we start, it depends on how much data we already have existing that can be shared with us versus how much data we're gonna have to collect, right? So it's kind of we're at a point where we don't have the data yet of what parameters the data collection occurs. Remember, I do understand from an HR standpoint, we can only ask certain things, remember? And also, everything we ask is optional for filling out. So and census is gonna be new in 2020, right? So all of those things saying, so from a timeline standpoint, LB, what do you think about 3 months, right, for the assessment? I would say 3 months, to be safe, right? With taking what you already currently have and bridging it with what we need to find out and know in order to give you an appropriate analysis.
Anything else? Well, thank you very much for the presentation.
Okay, so
Thank you.
All right. Feel free to send us any more questions.
Are you ready for the swearing in? Later?
It's on,
You want to announce later?
it's on the agenda, so I can.
Oh, she added it?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Let's take a look at it. It's different. Okay, we're gonna move to the minutes. Everyone had a chance to review the minutes. Get a motion to accept our minutes. Thank you very much. Can I get a second?
I'll second it.
Thank you.
Who was the first?
Thomas, sorry. And Alyssa. Thank you very much. So now we'll move to the treasurer's report.
Discussion and vote.
Oh, okay, I'm sorry. Discussion? Forgot all about that. Any discussion? All in favor? All right, unanimous over here.
Well, I need to abstain.
Oh, you abstain? Okay.
I'm abstaining.
Sarah and Arlene.
Abstaining
No.
because you weren't there?
Yeah, actually,
Which is
you
not
don't,
necessary.
yeah, abstention
Yeah.
is
If you have issues with the minutes, then abstain or object, but you can not have to be here to support the minutes.
But we don't know what happened in the meeting.
The minutes are they're a record. Your vote doesn't signify that those are all correct. Your vote is signifying that the minutes are getting recorded as approved. There's no need to abstain simply because you're absent, and indeed, as a general rule, abstentions should be minimized, because what they are is they are no vote, particularly when you're present. So that's the point that the
Do you
other
want me to
trustees
take it
are
again?
All in favor?
Aye.
We are unanimous. Thank you for that. Now we're gonna move on to the treasurer's report and the check registry.
So Brenda, you might refresh, that's what this claim.
Where is it at?
Right there.
She did it in here, not the agenda. I did the same thing.
Oh,
so I
okay.
couldn't find it on the-
Alright.
So that's where she put it in, I'll be right here for you.
Swearing in.
Alright,
Who's got treasurer?
who's doing it? Is this me?
I'll do it, and then
I'm sorry.
you'll administer it, and then I'll be present.
Alright. So I'm not reading it with this guy. Oh, let's sign up for this. Okay, my dear.
Charles, you gotta stand too.
Okay, come on over here, Mr. Charles.
First.
Thank you in advance. Okay, so this is the oath of office for the treasurer. You got to me, I, Charles Slaverick,
I, Charles Slaverick,
do solemnly swear
do solemnly swear
that I will support the Constitution of the United States
that I will support the Constitution of the United States
and the Constitution of the State of New York,
and the Constitution of the State of New York.
and that I will faithfully discharge the duties of office
I will faithfully discharge the duties of the office
of Treasurer of the Albany Public Library
of Treasurer of the Albany Public Library
according to the best of my ability.
according to the best of my ability.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Check, can we go ahead and sign that and send it back down? You do that.
So she added that in here. Mine is still not coming up right. Yeah, treasurer's report. All right, we're back again at the treasurer's report and check registry.
So foundation contributions are zeroed. Oh, I remember, never mind. Forget I said anything. I remember what the problem is and I don't want to get into it.
I know I'm a stickler. On the very, very top of the report, it should just say September 30th. It says September 30th.
And there's a contingency. Above total expenditures.
Any more questions and comments on the treasurer's report or the check registry? Can I have a motion to accept?
So moved.
Thank you. Second? Okay. Any discussion? All in favor? Oh, do you have something?
Oh, I just wanna make sure that's the motion on the check register itself, right?
Yes.
Oh, did
Yes,
we,
just the check registry.
Yeah,
we didn't do treasurer?
do treasurer, don't do
Right.
treasurers.
Alright.
So was that unanimous? All in favor? Alright. And now we're gonna move on to the capital fund report and the registry.
I just wanna remind people that the report is for the end, till the end of September, and the other one is a current expenditure, so they're not related. We see this, so I don't know if you remember, last month we saw the 42 in the capital fund check register, whatever it's called. Yeah, check register. So we'll see the 66 next month. Every 2 months. 2 months. Yes.
Yes.
Any more comments? Can I get a motion to accept?
I'll make a motion.
Okay. Alyssa, second? Thank you, Matt.
That's for the check register.
Check register, I'm sorry, yes. Our next item is the, I'm sorry, any discussion? All in favor? Finance committee next.
Yeah.
Okay, committee and liaison reports, we only have one, and that's the finance committee.
So we met on Tuesday, October 22nd. We had one piece of business to go over, which was the budget modification for the end of this year. It has been adjusted slightly since then, so you'll see it again under new business, because we will have to do a new motion for the budget modification since it's been changed since our committee meeting, and I'll let staff discuss those changes. So these minutes might not completely reflect the current budget mod that we'll see later tonight. But these are the notes from the committee meeting that we did have. There were a couple questions as we went over it. I don't want to read these off, but just to highlight, we discussed, for instance, office and library supplies will add memberships as a line, even if it's just 5,000 to be more transparent. That's a discussion that we've had earlier in the year about just being able to see on lines more visibly where exactly money is going to. So those are membership that we pay to organizations to be a part of. The insurance number, at the time, it was an exact figure. We had a quote. The APL switched insurance companies, so we actually saw savings of over 10%. We did have a little longer discussion about how the bond money works and where that goes. And at the time, the budget mod we were looking at was only 1.8% off from our original budget. Scott's goal was to be below 3%. And we were expecting to come up a little bit because we knew we were going to get more numbers coming in, and I think we're about there now, which is really, really good. And that was the only piece of business we took up.
Thank you. Questions? No questions? Okay, we're gonna move on to unfinished business. And we have the tangible development proposal. Pull that up. You wanna speak to that?
The proposal that's in here is shortened and is more realistic to what we're looking for in our goals. This is something that we moved forward on the advice of the committee which was formed through the strategic plan. This is a rather large and important endeavor for us to take. I don't know if we have the organizational bandwidth to take it on without having an organization like Tangible Development. They've been fantastic to work with. They have a fantastic reputation in both the business and nonprofit community, and I'm very impressed with the library work. They've just begun in the last year to dip their toes in the library world, but they seem to be the only consultant that's doing that. And I think they have a really strong understanding of what public libraries are about, and that would be a big help for us. The fact that they're local also means they have an understanding of the dynamics of our city and the capital region.
May I throw something else in, having worked with them? The research that they do on their own, sometimes when you have consultants, they come in and give you a boilerplate, but they did a lot of research that was very fine-tuned to the 4 counties I worked with, and that was very impressive to me.
Maybe this is inappropriate, but I just felt like one of the clients that they mentioned, the YMCA, has actually shut down within the city of Albany. So they worked with them to talk about diversity, and then the YMCA left the city, so
That happened 10 years ago, well, I mean, also North Albany recently, but.
yeah, so how did, I don't understand how,
But I will say we have
maybe
a
the
lot.
two things are unrelated,
We
I'm a
have-
little concerned.
We have a lot of partnerships with the YMCA and their other programs in the city, like they do do all the after-school programs in the city. So I'm not here to defend the YMCA, but I will say that the YMCA still has a significant touch point with the city, and I have seen that where they are working in the city, they do have a diverse workforce. And I can tell you, when I pick up my son every day after school, for the after-school program, I'm always trying to recruit some of their staff to work for us. Shouldn't have said that on video, but so I agree that I'm unhappy with them leaving the city of Albany as a physical space, but they still have programs going on in the city, and they do have a diverse workforce that's talented. What I see as a consumer, talented, and works really well with the youth in the city.
So I was just wondering how that work how that plan reflects on the actual consulting group.
Any other comments? We're voting on this tonight, right? Can I have a motion on the tangible development proposal? Okay, that is Jenna. Can I have a second, please? And I have Sarah. Any discussion? All in favor?
Was that everyone? Just one more
Is
time.
that everyone?
Like clear.
Oh, I'm sorry.
No, no,
All in favor? Is everyone in favor?
Aye.
Okay. All right.
With some information.
Next on our agenda, we have the BOT quarterly evaluation results. Let's see what we have here.
I think Karen wants to talk about this next month, so maybe we just,
No questions or comments? Yeah, I don't have anything to say about it. Okay, we can move to the UHLAN agreement.
So we have not had a chance to to talk with Upper Hudson about this. It's just been between things going on, it's just been a little bit of a month. So my suggestion to the board would be to vote for this. And then for us to use Matthew and maybe write something with Bob's help, expressing our concerns on a lack of policy for the protection of our user database. Because even if we vote no on this, it will not change the fact that we need to use Sierra as our ILS and integrated library system for right now. But I do think that we need to have our voice heard at the Upper Hudson Board, and maybe a strongly worded memo about our concerns about our patrons' privacy and the protections that need to be put in place by all the libraries that have access to it.
I don't know if this is appropriate, but can I throw this in? There are some library systems statewide that there's been breaches where Bitcoin and ransom, and there's nothing in this that shows that Upper Hudson will be responsible for a firewall, and all of those other issues, and I don't know whether that belongs in this or not, but it's been on my mind a lot, how secure they are, and their responsibility to keeping the hardware and software secure.
If the board chooses to vote no on this, I will be more than comfortable going before the Upper Hudson leadership and also even their board directly and saying that these are the reasons why my board is not voting for this.
Well, maybe it'd be for next year's conversation, because you just made the recommendation that we approve this.
You don't have to vote for things I recommend.
Well, but there's more than one option, okay, you can approve it, you can not approach this. If you're looking to have Upper Hudson make changes, I think the best thing to say is, you know, the board tabled it pending these questions being answered, or these comments being addressed.
That
And
sounds
that's-
like a plan.
That's the better way to approach it, because otherwise you're either going to send a bad message that you didn't approve it. I think that's gonna ruffle feathers. I think the converse of approving it and saying we don't like it is equally problematic. I mean, you know, Scott has identified other things, it sounds like Sarah has thoughts about concerns. We gave the library a completely redlined revised version of this thing 3 or 4 years ago, and the timing wasn't right to incorporate them. I mean, there's flaws in the agreement, there's no question. So if the board wanted to address it, that's what I would suggest you consider, is just say we're gonna put it off until we can have some questions answered.
Well, when do we have to sign it by next month?
I mean, you know, there's the practical and then there's the, you know, the reality. I don't think they're gonna turn off access to the ILS because you don't sign it. At the same time,
They did.
it's important to be a signatory at some level, right? You know, and to have, I assume that the concerns that are being offered aren't picayune concerns, they're concerns for the good of the entire system. And so I can't imagine that there'd be a pushback if you said these are things that we see that we wonder if you might address.
And I don't remember if this was asked before, but if we do ask for changes, can they change it just for us, or would that force a change among all the libraries?
I think with some of our concerns, it would have to be a change for all libraries, because some of our concerns is how our data is handled by, say, not to pick on Poet and Skill, but I think I just like the name, Poet and Skill Library. Would, you know, if they were to make a decision to do something, allow information to be shared, you know, we would want an agreement that says across the board, you know, this is the process in place if you're subpoenaed for this information. And I think Sarah's point about firewall and network security is definitely a conversation that needs to be had with the system.
And I would like to know how soon, God forbid, it happens, how soon it would take. I mean, Onondaga was down for a while, Westchester was down for 3 days. There's another system out there. It's the realities of what's going on.
The city of Albany was down for many weeks.
Some systems for weeks.
Yeah.
Schenectady.
I mean,
So are we in agreement to table this pending questions being answered?
yes, but
Do
so,
we need to?
so do we say table it for a month and we want those those questions need to be proposed to Upper Hudson and we need to hear back from them about where they are in answering those questions by next month,
I'll make
right?
that phone call tomorrow.
Yeah.
And the board meeting is also tomorrow, so just wind me up. Start talking when I get there.
Good suggestion.
You've got your questions. I think if there are questions from around the board, they need to get fed into Scott so that he and I can come up with communication to Tim and his board. I'm not suggesting this at all, but one of the things that you might ask is whether Tim could come and answer some of the questions for the board. I think he'd probably be willing to do that if he could schedule it. And he might relish the opportunity to give you some confidence in what they're doing, but.
He seems to like to get in front of the board. He's happy because, you know, it's the umbrella organization, so he likes to get out there to the different libraries.
And if these things were posed beforehand, you'd have plenty of time to address them. You know, just thoughts, depending on what your level of comfort or discomfort is.
So are we making a recommendation, so we could make a recommendation to invite him to next month's board meeting and provide him with the questions and concerns that we have?
Yeah, and I don't know whether he can attend or not, I mean, that part of it I have no idea, but I just, from the perspective of trying to get a dialogue done so we can get to the point of voting, that might
Yeah.
be.
I think I would suggest that.
are there questions other than the ones that Scott has raised that we need to take with him, take to them?
I think Sarah's questions about firewall and security.
I mean, they're all linked into this idea of patron data protection and patron data security. Are there other topics of concern?
Insurance.
I'm sorry?
Are there resources available should there be a breach in terms of
Do they have a cyber security policy in place?
And insurance.
That insurance isn't terrific. It's expensive.
Let me tell you, it is helpful. We had an experience, and our company, our insurance people hired forensic specialists to go in and do that deep dive to see what was going on, and attorneys, and put something in place for any breaches that were uncovered to protect those people. So we need to have something like that. So I don't know what's in place, but we need to have something. I mean, do they have anything in place?
We don't know.
Okay.
I know they've started the discussion, any comments on it, because it's part of the technology group. So the last couple months, they've had open the discussions about what needs to be handled for cybersecurity, but I'm not exactly sure what they themselves have.
Okay, so again, we will table this pending questions being posed and answered and recommendation to invite Tim and Scott will take care of that. Okay? So now we'll move on to new business. And first thing we have on new business is Central Library budget.
Canceling Mango.
I know,
Yes.
I'm sad.
Do you have any comments about that?
I mean,
So-
Duolingo doesn't help.
So this was a prolonged conversation and probably one of the more in-depth ones we've had. I'm a member of the Central Library Advisory Committee, and so we did a deep dive on this. As we know, the school district actually uses Duolingo, they don't use Mango. I'm sure there's a classroom we will hear about that uses Mango, but because it's a free product, you don't need a library card, you don't need to go through that extra hoop to use it. So we've asked several times now for the numbers of how many people from our library district actually use Mango. There are only, I believe, 4,000 users in the system that use Mango. So that means at most 4,000 people in Albany use it, but I doubt we're the only ones using it. So we do, if we look and find out like 3,090 people, 900 people were using it from Albany, we are talking to other libraries and saying, can we go in together or come out of our pocket instead of central library funds? But the return on investment to use central library funds for Mango just was not comparable to using it for really our purposes to actually put that money into e-audiobooks, which are extremely popular.
I want Testament 6 months.
Yeah, so our goal is to bring down the wait time for ebooks and e-material, and we think that this money would be better spent putting it towards that. I know there are issues with Macmillan and publishers, and that issue is actually only compounding it because it's just making those books more expensive and the wait's longer. But we sat around for a while and just went around again and again and again and just said, really what's popular is e-material, and that would be where the money would be best spent.
How much was Mango? Cause I see the number for the ebooks, but I'm assuming that's not all being reallocated, there was some existing already?
Yes, so I believe.
C'est la vie.
That's okay, not a big deal.
So, no, it's a good question. I can look up the old central library budget and see where it is.
Can I ask a question about the e-content that you're talking about? The way the arcane law is written, it can only be nonfiction.
Nonfiction, yes. That does not change.
I understand, so is there enough fiction out there?
There's a big enough demand.
And
There's enough demand for, and basically what we're doing is we're telling member libraries to spend their money on fiction and not spend any money at all on nonfiction, rely on the nonfiction. So it's kind of, there is a demand. That's the only e-audiobooks that I listen to. Not that I'm a good example, but I believe there's a high demand for nonfiction and e-audiobooks, and we could do 4 times the money in there, and I think it would still be used up and the return on investment would be good.
I apologize, the VPN client is updating on my computer, so.
I think it's 6,000, but
Yeah.
if not, we'll email everybody and let them know what the difference is.
It's at least 6 months for becoming by Michelle Obama, if we want just an example.
So we'll talk to CMS, see if we can buy another copy.
Oh, no, not for me.
Any other comments?
I don't think we can. So this is looking through all of UHLS, so for 0 to 10 loans, 2 holds of 14, 25 copies in use, 125 people a week. That's just from Michelle though.
Alright, so can we get a motion to approve the central library budget?
So moved.
Thank you, Ms. Sarah. Second. Thank you, Arlene. Any discussion? All in favor? Unanimous, thank you very much.
Sorry, Nate though.
Our second item is the budget modification.
Yeah, sure, I can start talking about that. So this is a slightly modified version of the document that was put in front of the Finance Committee. In the interest of time, I'll try to keep it brief here and just stick to the bottom lines. So revenue, we didn't make too much of an adjustment to. We did eliminate the miscellaneous revenue line, which didn't really have anything assigned to it. It's sort of unclear why that was factored into previous budgets to begin with. Moving on to payroll and related costs, we are seeing some savings there. A lot of that is due to the unfilled vacancies we had throughout the year. And also on the health insurance end, we did see some underuse of our deductible reimbursement. We had a bit more in the budget for that than it looks like we're going to need. Occupancy costs. You can see the maintenance, repair, supplies line is significantly under. And I think a big part of the reason for that is the establishment of the capital fund this year. A lot of those projects probably would have gone towards that line this year. We did also see some savings with some of our vendors. We changed vendors, saw some savings with them. We also eliminated the other building cost line. It's another line that didn't really have any expenses being assigned to it, and does not need to be part of the budget going forward. Materials and services, you can see that's self-explanatory. The administrative and miscellaneous area of the budget, slightly over budget. Part of the reason for that is the office and library supply line in particular has been used as a catch-all account of sorts with multiple different expense types rolling up into that. So in order to account for that, we did boost the budget on that a little bit. IT, I think it was discussed previously that the software budget was under budget previously, but we've corrected that here. And what it all ends up to is a surplus of $267,000 and change, off from the modified budget that was approved earlier this year.
And that's about 1.4% off from the budget we passed.
Right.
How does that compare to previous years? Sorry, you don't have to know that offhand.
Much better.
Much better though,
Much
right?
better. Compared to the 3-4%,
Okay,
close to 5%, I think, last year.
that's great.
The 5% last year was
Okay.
because of, 5% last year was because of, we got a lot more money than expected from Pelicans.
Hmm.
In the past, we've had savings of around 300 to 400, over $400,000.
Can I have a motion to approve the budget modification?
Let's make that motion.
Thank you, Sarah. Second? Thank you, Alyssa. Any discussion?
I will make one comment regarding that. Once the board approves this, I will change my treasurer's report to reflect the new bona fide budget figures,
Thank you.
so that you can compare those against the actuals. And at the same time, while I'm at it, while I've got my mouth going, I've long been in communication with Sarah regarding the treasurer's duties. And in those duties, it did say perform bank reconciliations. I will put the board at ease, they're done each and every month before I even do reports to the board. If you need to see them at any time, I have separate monthly files in my cabinet that I'll be more than willing to let you come in and see them or do whatever you want with them, but they are done, okay? And as far as all the other duties that are here, I basically do most of these duties.
Yeah, I think there was a misunderstanding in our email, and I meant to talk to you tonight, that's why I didn't respond back. It's just, the position was such a rough, it was a one page that encompasses 4 different positions who everyone has their hand in finance. Since it's 12 years old, we're just trying to go over everything and make sure everything is in line, so that was nothing against you.
No, I'm not taking it
Okay.
at
I didn't
that
want
at
you
all.
to it taken it the wrong way.
I just wanted to put the board at ease to let you know that these things are being done. Okay?
All in favor? The motion on the table?
Aye.
Unanimous? Great. Thank you very much. And now we will move to the director.
So in October, the library hosted the Albany Public Library Foundation's annual Literary Legends Gala, at the Washington Avenue branch. The branch also saw the return of the silent film spectacular series, which is extremely popular. At the Arbor Hill West Hill branch, adults explored American history through poetry, while teens celebrated National Taco Day. The Bach branch organized a toddler story time with a firefighter theme and field trip to the firehouse, which is right next door. The Pine Hills branch launched a new discussion series about classical music. The Delaware branch hosted 2 small business programs to help prospective entrepreneurs. And the Howe branch hosted a book signing by renowned MC and new author Rakim. Close to 300 people attended this event. And this is a very small sampling of everything that we did last month. Upcoming programs, kids and families can enjoy the magic of the holidays while they construct their own cheery gingerbread houses to take home on December 5th at the Delaware branch. Bach is, on November 20th, is doing a Charlie Brown Thanksgiving, which will include toast, jelly beans, and popcorn, and that is on November 20th. And there will be an apple stamp art program for kids and teens on November 21st at the Howe branch. Again, this is a small sampling of all the programs that we have going on for the next month. Operations in October, Washington Avenue saw several capital projects completed, including extensive work on the first floor. And also we saw our delivery system between the libraries, this is across the system, which is a program overseen by the Upper Hudson Library System, came to a sudden and abrupt halt in mid-October. I want to give a shout out to my staff who, we got the email in the middle of our supervisors meeting and everybody halted, and Melanie and the crew had a plan together quickly. We got it out on social media. We all were delivering books between branches. Honestly, if you got any complaints, it'll be a surprise because I think we did a good job of internally keeping it going. In administration, the administration has been onboarding the new facilities manager, Adam Fireball, and we're very happy to have him. And the library's executive director has been asked to join the board of the Urban Libraries Unite and the Albany Institute of Art and History's Community Engagement Committee. Just a little bit of history, because I think it's important for us to know our history. In anticipation of our 100-year anniversary in 2022, maybe 2023, I will be picking years to review. This year I did 1999, which was an exciting year for the library because it was the year the main library completed a major renovation on the first and second floors. Also, there were 2 major grants that were awarded that year, which had a lasting impact on the library. First, the city received a HUD grant for a project that included a branch in North Albany, and the Howe branch of the Albany Public Library received a grant which led to an interesting hire. And then action items, we signed our CDTA agreement, and our all 3 construction grant applications were put in and have been accepted. I think they're voted, they need to be voted on by the Upper Hudson Board tomorrow, so maybe I'll wait till Wednesday to call Tim. But it looks like all 3 applications will be accepted. Any questions? And Melanie's gonna do, last meeting, we had a quick question about NewsGuard, so she's gonna do
I tried it.
a show. Are there any questions while she sets up?
We're trending a little below our usual
So,
stats.
yeah, so stats, numbers for programs, visits, computer usage, and reference were down compared to the same month last year, but still trending up from the previous year. Circulation is down. Room usage was up compared to this time last year. One of the major drags was construction at Washington Avenue, which had an impact on both circulation and computer use, and the computer use was impacted enough to actually bring our numbers down. Just having 4 public PCs down temporarily, which they're still down, is probably what saw that big drop in our computer usage numbers. And 3/4 of our DVD collection was in storage, but those DVDs are back out. So we've seen a little bit of a dip in our numbers. Also an interesting thing to report, it is estimated that 41% of the visits to the Washington Avenue branch are coming to the youth services room. And during the summer, this grows to 53%, but drops down to 35% during the school. So we're turning up for the year, but we didn't have a great month.
Okay, Melanie?
So we mentioned NewsGuard is an extension on the Chrome browser. And giving you a little overview of it, so if you go to NewsGuard Tech, you can read, they have a great information on how they score. What they do is they provide a nutrition label for each of the sites, and I'll show you what their nutrition label looks like. But you'll see up in this corner, there's the little shield, it's black outline there right now. But if you go to a news website, such as Reuters, you'll see that it has a little green, it's turned green with a little check mark in it. And that means it's a trusted news site. And then if you kind of hover over the shield, or click on the shield, it pops up the nutrition list for it. So these are what they kind of rate the websites on, and these are for news sites. So credibility, does it repeatedly publish false content, gathers and presents information responsibly, and so on. And then transparency as well. So this one, even though it's green, it did get a ding on the site provides names of content creators along with either contact or biographical information. So they're not so good on that, but they're good on all the other things.
Is this downloaded on your computer?
So it is an extension in the Google Chrome app. So if you go up, first of all, when you go back to news, you can hit NewsGuard right there, click on that, and it will walk you through doing it, or I believe on more tools, there's extensions, and you can go through. So if you go to your settings for Chrome, more tools and then extensions, it's an add-on that kind of puts it into that toolbar for you. So I showed you Reuters. you go to someplace like TMZ, it pops up with a red shield. I couldn't, my other sites that I normally go to have, because websites are actually starting to respond to this. So my go-to is always Breitbart. Breitbart's actually fixed their stuff. So they have a green rating now. So all my websites I used to go to for red rating, even the one Scott mentioned, doesn't sound like I know.
Not TMZ.
TMZ is gonna do this. So they go through and, credibility, transparency, they get low marks on.
What about the New York Times? I hear in Florida, it's a problem.
You mean the failing New York Times?
So you can, actually, they get a green rating there. They do good, according to this site. Something that's satirical, like The Onion, gets a little orange with a happy face, to show you that it's kind of a little jokey site. And then, what I like too is I use Google News for an aggregator, and it actually puts all the shields right in the aggregator, so you can see when you're looking at headlines, what site you're going to.
Is this on the public computers?
So we have loaded this onto the public computers, so on all of our public computers this is available. We're starting to do some training sessions on it, so especially the one-on-one sessions where people are looking and saying, because there is thankfully an uptick in interest in media literacy. So this is something that we point out that, just a quick and dirty, this is a good way to keep track of things. And it's always, we do tell them, don't just take the shield at face value, go dig a little deeper, because even when you do, it gives you the quick and dirty one, but then it does a full one, and each news site has a full listing, and it gives you a whole breakdown of all their ratings, too. So, it's a really good, just kind of informational thing that we started. We are listed on NewsGuard's site, because I know Ohio, there's a couple of other library systems that started. We were one of the probably first 10 library systems to get on board with it, and now ALA is recommending this as well. It is a recommended site for media literacy. So it's nice and quick, something that you can just add, and it's just a nice reminder every so often when you are looking at things, hey, is this factual information? That's it.
Thank you, Melanie.
Thank you. Is that it for you, Scott?
That's it for me.
Okay, any public comment? Alrighty, there's no executive session, I don't think, or do we?
2 points.
Do, I'm sorry?
Yeah, Karen had requested potentially going into.
Oh, no, I already took care of that already. There's no executive session. Motion to adjourn,
So moved.
second?